All right. So, as you probably know by now, if you're watching this video, ZBrush on the iPad has been released. It's been out for 2 or 3 days now. I'm loving it. Initially, I thought it was 100% full featured. I've come across, 1 or 2 things that aren't there, most notably for me, ZModeler, but that's okay. I mean, that was something that came a lot later to even the desktop version of ZBrush, and I would imagine it's something that they will add soon, but that definitely is missing. Today, I wanted to go ahead and show you, how to leverage some of these base models. So let's go ahead and use this female figure here, and credit due to the original sculptor of this model. Thank you. And, it's free for you to use in any way that you like. Commercially, obviously, you can't take it as is and try to pawn it off as your own creation. But if you use it as just a starting point and make something completely unique, then go for it. I mean, that you do you. But essentially what I wanted to show today is my process for creating clothing. This female character right now is without clothing, and we want to help her out here. So if you wonder why it was orange, that's the color of the poly mask, or polygroup, excuse me. And so I had that visible. We can turn that off and, try out different materials that you might want to work with. And this is not permanent, when you're in ZBrush, it's just something that helps you visualize, see imperfections or different things. So, if ZModeler was indeed part of this release, then there's a good chance I would do this a little differently. But since it's not, I'll show you the way I originally learned to make clothing, which is still totally legit. And I'm sure there's others out there that'll say, you're doing it wrong. That's okay. This is, there's no right or wrong reason, really. It's just what works for you, what gets your final result. So you'll see initially I changed from perspective to orthographic mode, or perspective off. And then what we want to do is, let's get this woman covered up so we don't get in trouble with our significant others, right? To mask, you hold this button down here. So that's what we want to do, is essentially just draw a shirt, So let's go ahead and do an undershirt, a tank top. Oh, look, I accidentally went into a different mode there. We're just painting this on. And, for a big area, you could do that. Instead of using the stroke version, you can change that to drag rectangle. And then now I can fill in a big area here. But you have to be on masking. So there you go. So see, I'm able to do big swaths of area that way. And that was the trick. So see, here, I'm learning at the same time, what to do here. Because I've used the desktop version forever, but new to this touch interface. So I use the drag rect. I select that without holding down masking, and so that's why it didn't work quite right. But there's other options, lasso, which is great to see. So you can see here that it's lasso, so now I can get different shapes here. And because it's on mirror, it gets both sides, and that just helps maybe get us cleaner lines. Although your lines don't have to be super clean for this process. We will clean it up later. Oh, look at this. I'm getting some masking on the arms. We don't want that. So to subtract the mask, you hold down the mask and kind of slide your finger over. So you've got these two bottom left ones selected. And then you can draw a white mask around it, and that removes the area. So I'm going to go back to freehand brush mode and paint some stuff in, and I'll switch between subtracting and adding. So here under the arms, it's a little tight. Another note is when you're painting like this, brushing, it's just going to do the front face polygons, but things like lasso is going to go all the way through the model. So just a note, I think there's some settings buried in the masking panel somewhere where you can change that, but honestly, I haven't ever done that. I've just worked with it. So trying to get a rough idea of what this undershirt might look like. Tank top. There are a lot of different styles, but we're not trying to create a finished thing at the moment, just showing you my process. And, whoops, I would recommend, before creating clothing, you want to make sure you have your base character how you want it. So this is, straight out of the ZBrush templates, and so you probably don't want to use it right as is because other people will recognize it and they might question why you're doing that. But if your goal is to just create clothing and demonstrate that, then that's fine. But if you're trying to say, hey, look at this character I created and I'm responsible for the whole thing, well, you would have to give that original artist the credit because you're using it's a good idea to give them credit anyways. Like, hey, I started with the base mesh by so-and-so, and I apologize, I don't remember his name, but, clothing is kind of the last step when it comes to modeling. Unless your, model is like you don't have skin underneath your model is all inclusive. If you were to open up the shirt or pull it up or whatever, which sounds inappropriate, I apologize, then you would see inside of the model, not the base model underneath. So keep that in mind. All right, so that helps. She's got a skin tight undershirt on, right? So there are different ways or different things to talk about here. So right now it's just masked. You're not doing anything. If you did want this to be part of the same mesh, you could just invert the mask like that, and then use your deformation tools here to kind of bump that up. Let's see, what's a good one? Inflate or something like that. Yeah, let's do inflate. See how I've just barely touched that, and it gives a little bit of thickness, and then you can go in there and refine the shapes, and so that's totally good. But if you want it to be a separate piece of clothing because you're working on some cinematic model or AAA gaming model or something, then yeah, you're going to want it to be a separate piece, most likely, just so there's more you can do with it. So what you want to do is with that masked, and now I've got to invert my mask. There we go. So to invert, it's just hold down masking and tap outside of the model. Right now you can see the mask is a little fuzzy, so it'll still work, this process, without doing this, but if you're OCD and you want to sharpen the mask, you can do that and see, what's going on a little better. And so that's pretty sharp. You'll notice when I move the model, it goes pixelated. That's not because your machine, your iPad is lagging, but rather it's because ZBrush just does that to, because this has a subdivided surface on it, and they're just trying to save resources to make this more universally friendly or whatever. And it's a good little indicator that, hey, there are other subdivision levels on this thing. So if you don't want it to do that, you could go into geometry, and there's that right up at the top there. See, we're at level 4. You could delete the lower levels or go down to your lowest level, whatever. But for these purposes, we're not worrying about it. So we have a sharp mask here on our model. Now it's time for the magic to happen. And if you don't want your palette to close on you all the time, you can dock it and just grab this little thing up here at the top, and then it creates this little widget. So have that around, and when you open it, it stays open. You can work with your model underneath, which is a handy little feature, especially for what we're doing next here. And if you need a little bit more room, you could even collapse that, but you may not know the icons yet. So we want to go to Subtool and then Extract, which is down here. Okay. And then you can even get more space if you want by pulling this up. And so now we're dealing with it'll collapse that. Now we're dealing with a relatively small panel here. And of course, this can move around by grabbing that middle section. Okay, so we've got our mask section. We hit Extract, and then you'll see a preview. Right now, this isn't official. This is a super thick shirt. Maybe if you're building armor or, it's 1 inch wool, then maybe that's appropriate. But it's not what I'm looking for. So I'm going to scale this down, and you kind of do it blindly, and you just have to keep testing it. See, that's extremely thin. So maybe I'll bump it up a little bit more, maybe a little bit more, just so I can just see it a little better. And then you can just hit Accept, and you'll have it. There's different settings in here, the smoothing level, whatever. We'll go ahead and accept that. So now it's its own piece, and the reason the base model disappeared is because I have solo activated here, which comes in handy for the next step. So you can see the edges are left unmasked and everything else is masked. And so that's handy if you wanted to kind of keep this and just polish up the edges, and you can do it by hand or go back into your deformation panel and run some smoothing or polishing. But we're actually going to get rid of a lot of that stuff. So I'm going to get rid of the mask by holding down Mask, drawing rectangle. Now it's mask free. Let's go into, that's the floor, F, into this where we can see the different poly groups. And we've got a bit of a problem, I think, because the inside mask and the outside mask is the same. So when I, grab this masking plus the shift and hold both of those down and click it, okay, good. That is, even though it looked the same, it's different. So now we just have that inside mask. I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to select these two again over here, and then I'm going to tap to invert the selection, right? No, that gets rid of it. So do a box, that inverts the selection, so you can see them seeing through. Okay, and then what we want to do is go back to our panel here, geometry, and then modify topology. And I want to delete the hidden. So now that part of the that polygroup is gone. We'll do the same thing with this polygroup. So now we just have the front facing, mesh, visible. Go ahead and delete the hidden. So now it's gone, and we can work with this. And what we want to do is, right now, the polygons, there's just too many of them. It's going to take forever to try to get it to something that looks more like clothing rather than this super skin tight wet t-shirt tank top thing. So the way we'll do that is, want to make sure, it's not matched. It's kind of darker. So go to this button here at the bottom, which is your ZRemesher, which is such a great tool. And then unselect adapt. Okay. And then you change your target polygon count to, you try something. I went to 0.31, hit ZRemesher, and then it works its magic, and there you go. I've already got a much more simple set of polygons to work with. Now, because the breasts are so pronounced, it, emphasized that and gave us some polygons that maybe we wouldn't want, because that's still looking like a skin tight shirt thing. So let's get out of here, and we're going to come back to the remeshing, but let's give it a little bit of dimension by sculpting some shape into it. And you can just, use whatever brush feels right to you. I'm using the clay buildup, and just kind of, the fabric is being stretched in the middle here. So we need to build that up. Here it wouldn't be so tight, so we can build that area up. You can smooth a little bit. Down here, again, everything's being pulled differently than what's going on right now, right? And we're just trying to get a good good topology with the ZRemesher right now. So we can come back later. We will come back later, obviously, and fix this and make it look more realistic. Just pull the shirt away a little bit, because it's, it's just the way the fabric would lay, right? Now it's not, things aren't going to be so snug. It's got to hang a little bit, unless you're wearing a shirt size that's 2 or 3 sizes too small, which, if that's your thing, that's what you want to do, you do you. I'm a bigger guy, so clothing that, once fit, maybe looks like this on me now. So you adapt, we evolve, sometimes in the wrong direction, right? So anyways, we're doing our thing, smoothing a little bit, but this should help matters, right? I keep fussing. Move it away from the abdomen a little bit. Man, I sound so scientific. Okay, and then back to ZRemesher. And this time, since I like the polygon count, I'm going to select same. So now when I ZRemesh it, it's not going to add more or less. It's just going to keep it the same. So ZRemesh, there you go. Now we have something that's much better. It's not accentuating the individual breasts. It's acting more like a shirt. So now if you're doing something a little more low poly, you might keep it like this and move on and you're good to go. You can, add thickness to this again or keep it, just one polygon thick. It all depends on what you're doing. I would recommend adding your thickness as the last step after you sculpted it how you want. And so at this higher polygon count, I'm just moving around and making sure it looks halfway decent. And then we can go to geometry and subdivide that. You can do it here, or there's this button down here, hit divide, which since they have that handy place for it, might as well do it here. So I'm going to divide it again. And we're not seeing it reflected. This does the same thing on the desktop version. So you have to kind of refresh your polygon view. You can see as it subdivided it kind of smoothed everything out, and that way we're getting some of the base model poking through, so we can just kind of fix that. I keep saying kind of, but there's no kind of about it, right? We're doing this thing. This is the quick menu for changing size of your brush. You can see that things get a little squishier now that we're at such a high polygon count. So with something like that, rather than trying to fix it here, I'm going to back out of it and go back to a lower level. So I can slide this back down to 1 and then move it. That'll be a cleaner move because we're dealing with bigger polygons and that haven't been smoothed out yet by the subdivision process, right? And I'm holding down this button, acts like the shift button on the keyboard to smooth things. That's something that I haven't tried yet, but I'll have to try, is connecting a keyboard, a Bluetooth keyboard or something, to my iPad and using those keyboard shortcuts, because I'm sure they probably work. So that'll be interesting to try. Then I can bring this back up to 3. And then if we look at this area, it still looks like crap. So sometimes that's because it just kind of remembers stuff. So you can delete the subdivisions, the higher subdivisions, and then divide again, and it gets better, but still not great. And that is probably because my topology, there's some weirdness going on there. So I'm forced to do this. So we might go in there with the build-up brush and start to paint in some wrinkles, subdivide it again. It likes to peek through on the base model, but again, a bunch of ways you can handle this. And so build the area up. I'm constantly building up and then smoothing. So, how is this fabric pulling on these different forms? There are actually fabric brushes in here as well. I'm showing you this way just because this is the way I did it originally. But maybe I'll try a fabric brush here just to show you what I'm talking about. But again, all of these tools that we've been given just give us different options. You know, sometimes you want things to function exactly as they would in real life, and so therefore some of those dynamic fabric brushes are going to be the right things. Other times you don't want it to be exactly realistic. You want it to be hyper realistic, you know, better than. So you can see we're starting to get some pixelation there. I may not have said it yet in this video, but if you want to sculpt into the model and you're currently using a brush that's sculpting out, to sculpt inward, you use this plus minus button here. So now I'm carving in, right? So, and if the default of the brush were to carve in like the damn standard brush, then that would make it, you know, extrude, whatever the correct terms are, huh? All right, so that gives you an idea. As promised, let's try one of these cloth brushes. So several different things: cloth slide, cloth pull. Let's try the cloth slide one. Whoops. Make that a little bigger. See how it's following the model underneath and working with that. Pretty amazing. You know, that doesn't necessarily look realistic, but it's doing what this brush is supposed to do. So let's try another one. Getting some weird stuff. Let's try cloth pull instead of cloth slide. Turn this down a little bit. I'm just gonna pull it, yeah. So, some interesting stuff going on again. Some of it's what you want, some of it isn't what you want. So, you can see, depending on what you're doing, you're going to want different things. You know, there's settings here to the cloth pull brush, you know, the depth, maybe bring it up, and maybe that would keep it from going so close to the base mesh. Let's see what happens now. Yeah, I mean, this area was already a problem, but so I've lost all credibility at this point. I apologize. All right. No, this is real life. This is like how it works, and you shouldn't feel bad because you tried something and maybe you don't understand that tool as well as you thought you did or should right out of the gates. That's fine. You know how to fix it. It's just some patience and, you know, some time, right? Just trust the process. Don't beat yourself up like, man, I don't know how to use that new fancy brush, or I'm not getting the results I had hoped to, or whatever. And just get back there to what you know, make it as good as you can. And, you know, you may want to ZRemesh again after putting in some of these folds and wrinkles and what have you. It all depends on what you're doing. Let's get the damn standard brush. And you might say, why is this guy so angry and swearing? Right? Well, damn standard is referring to Damien, who is a ZBrusher, and I told the story in my last video, but this became the new standard brush, much preferred to the original ZBrush standard brush, which is still around. It's over here on the far left, but it's one I never use anymore, unless maybe it's for poly painting or something. So, like anything, really, I mean, yeah, there are some cloth tools out there, marvelous, and different blender plugins, and as we've seen, ZBrush has some tools and something I need to play with more, and I think there's some dynamic stuff to get it to just rest on the model. All that stuff is great, but it's nice to be able to know how to do it by hand if needed. Again, sometimes you don't want the exact realistic result, and as an artist, as a sculptor, painter, whatever, you would have to do this stuff by hand. You look at reference and go to town. And I'm on symmetry mode, obviously, and wrinkles aren't going to be perfectly symmetrical, so it is a good idea to turn it off and do some kind of hero wrinkles that break up the symmetry a little bit. That's going to add to your realism. But then you lose your ability for symmetry. So those things I usually save to the very end. So again, this has no thickness to it. Honestly, I would probably, since we don't have the ZModeler tools in here, which is a nice way to kind of thicken something. I think there's another way that I'll show you here in a minute, but I would recommend just taking this mesh into like a blender, when you're finished, and then you can add like a solidify modifier to it, and then it still stays a single, polygon thick piece of clothing, but you can add thickness that's kind of non-destructive and play with that, and it'll animate easier, all the things. So that is why I would say, hey, if you're building a tank top, this gets you pretty close to the way there. Yeah, we could sculpt in the folded piece of material as well, or maybe that's done at the painting level. It all depends on what you're doing here. I just wanted to show you what it takes to put some clothes on these naked models, right? But as promised, let's look at the other way to add thickness. So I believe modified topology, is that right? Close holes, no, okay. All right, so that's not what I thought, but we can go to our extract again on the subtool and pull a new subtraction. That totally works. So let's do that. So what I would want to do is mask, tap outside. It's now all masked. And then if I hit extract, see it defaults back to that super thick amount. We're going to scale that down, hit extract again. That's a good place. I'm going to say accept. And then now it's masked again. I'm going to unmask it. And then I'm going to go to my subtools, which if you're not familiar with ZBrush, subtools are the individual model pieces. They call a model a tool in ZBrush. I don't know exactly why, but now we zoom in. This has thickness, and now you could go in and do your detail sculpting at a higher resolution. But I hope that that helped and you learned a thing or two, and get in there, work in ZBrush on the iPad. It's amazing. I love it. Thanks.